I'm Daniel. I've never been the kind of guy to seek revenge. I always believed in letting things go, in being the bigger person. But sometimes, life throws you into a corner, and the only way out is through the fire. When I married Claire, I thought I hit the jackpot. She was kind, funny, loyal, everything I ever wanted. We met in college, and even back then I knew she was the one. We didn't rush things. We dated for 4 years, got engaged, and finally married after we had both settled into our jobs. I work in IT for a medium-sized firm. Claire's a nurse. We weren't rich, but we were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. Things started to shift the moment I met her mother, Sandra. Claire's dad, Peter, was decent, quiet, observant. The kind of man who only speaks when he has something worth saying. But Sandra, she was a different story. From day one, I knew she didn't like me. She never said it outright, but it was in her eyes, her tone, the way she looked me up and down like I wasn't good enough for her daughter. She came from money, old money. The kind that acts polite in public and cruel in private. At first, I brushed it off. I told Claire it didn't matter that I wasn't marrying her family, but deep down, it bothered me. Every family dinner, Sandra would throw subtle insults my way. "Oh, that's cute you work in IT. Such a modern job. Not very stable, but I guess it works for now." Or she'd talk about Claire's exes in glowing terms, loud enough for me to hear. Claire always defended me, but it was never loud enough to make Sandra stop. It got worse after we moved into our first home, a modest 2-bedroom house in the suburbs. Sandra offered to help us with the down payment. I declined. That really got under her skin. She saw it as an insult to her pride, her generosity. I think that's when she really began to hate me. Still, I tried. Every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner, I was there with a smile. I brought gifts, helped clean up, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I tried to win her over. But Sandra wasn't the kind of woman who could be won. She wanted control, and I was the man who took her daughter out of her grip. Then came the family gathering that changed everything. It was Claire's cousin's engagement party, hosted at Sandra and Peter's house. Big backyard, fancy decorations, waiters in black suits, string quartet in the corner. The whole thing felt like a scene from a movie. Everyone from Claire's side of the family was there, dressed up and polite with those forced smiles rich people wear when they're around someone they look down on. I knew I didn't belong, but I showed up anyway. For Claire. Sandra greeted me with a fake hug and a cold kiss on the cheek. Her eyes scanned me like she was checking if I had stepped in something. Peter gave me a firm handshake and a quiet nod. We exchanged a few pleasantries, and then Claire disappeared into the sea of guests, chatting with cousins and aunts. I was about to head to the bar when Sandra stopped me. She smiled, genuinely, or so it seemed, and handed me a drink. "You must be tired," she said. "Here, I made this especially for you." Something about her tone put me off. Sandra never brought me drinks. She barely even spoke to me unless she had something sharp to say. I took the glass, thanked her, and pretended to sip. But I didn't drink. Not yet. Something was off. I could feel it in my gut. I held the glass close, looked around, and noticed Peter standing near the fireplace, sipping his scotch. He caught my eye, gave me a half smile. Then he looked at Sandra, and I swear there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Suspicion? Worry? I didn't know what Sandra had put in that drink, but I wasn't about to find out the hard way. And that was the moment a dangerous idea entered my mind, one that would change everything. That night, after the gathering ended, I couldn't sleep. Not just because of what happened with the drink, but because of what it confirmed. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. My instincts had been screaming at me for months, but I kept brushing them off because she was family. My wife's mother. How could I even say that out loud? My mother-in-law tried to drug me at a family dinner. Who would believe that? But the way Gerald collapsed, the confusion, the way her face went pale like a ghost, it told me everything. The ambulance came fast. Everyone was in shock except me. I was quiet, still, watching. My heart pounded, but not out of fear, out of rage. Controlled, burning rage. When we reached the hospital, I stayed close. I acted confused. I held my wife's hand. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, soft. She shook her head. "I don't know, he just collapsed. Maybe his blood pressure." But I kept looking at her mother. She couldn't even look at me. The doctors ran tests. They found traces of something in Gerald's system. Nothing fatal, but something that shouldn't have been there. Something meant to mess with his head. His speech was slurred. He had trouble keeping his eyes open, and he kept repeating things. They said it looked like he was drugged. Now the family started panicking. My wife's mother tried to act shocked. "What? Drugged? That can't be right," she gasped. But she didn't meet my eyes. She kept avoiding them. I stayed quiet. I didn't say a word. That night at the hospital, when everyone had left, I sat beside Gerald. He was stable, resting. I whispered to him, "You've always hated me, I know that. But tonight, I think you saved my life. I won't forget it." And for the first time in years, I saw something on his face. A little softness, maybe regret, maybe guilt. I didn't know. When I got home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. My wife came in. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at her, eyes full of pain. "Do you trust me?" I asked. She frowned. "Of course." "Then listen," I said. "I think your mother was trying to drug me." She laughed, like I was telling a joke. "That's insane," she said, waving it off. "Why would she ever do something like that?" I looked at her dead in the eyes. "You tell me." Silence. She didn't know what to say. And that's when I realized, deep down, she wasn't as surprised as she pretended to be. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. Sarah was distant, barely making eye contact as she poured coffee. I didn't ask about George. I didn't ask if he was okay or what Margot told him when they slipped outside. I had a feeling I wasn't ready to know. But one thing I did know, Margot wouldn't stop now. I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. As I strolled down the street, the weight of the past few months hit me all at once. I thought about the family gatherings where Margot would make passive-aggressive jokes, each one carefully delivered like a dagger hidden behind a smile. How she once told Sarah, "You used to laugh more before Daniel came into your life." And Sarah, instead of defending me, just smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. It was like death by 1,000 cuts. No single moment had been big enough to fight about, but they'd piled up inside me, like bricks, slowly building a wall between me and my wife. I knew Sarah loved me, but I also knew she trusted her mother more than she should. And Margot? She was manipulative, yes, but clever too. She never said anything outright, always suggestions, doubts, planting seeds she knew would grow in Sarah's mind. And that drink last night? That was proof she'd finally stopped hiding her intentions. My phone buzzed. A message from George. "Meet me at Oak Ridge Park. Now." I felt my stomach drop. I didn't know what to expect. Anger? Disbelief? Would he accuse me of something? Demand answers? I had no clue what Margot told him, but I had no choice. I had to face this. When I arrived, George was sitting alone on a bench under an old maple tree. His arms were folded, eyes staring blankly into the distance. He didn't look at me when I sat down beside him. "You switched the drinks, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I stayed silent. I tasted something. Bitter, unfamiliar. Only had a few sips, but it burned my throat. Made me feel lightheaded. I nodded slowly. I didn't know what was in it. I only saw her do it, last minute. She looked around to make sure no one was watching, then dropped something into my glass. I reacted. He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes weren't angry, they were tired, betrayed. "Do you know how long I've suspected she was doing things behind my back?" Whispers to the kids, stories twisted about you, even about me. But I never had proof. I thought I was just being paranoid. I exhaled deeply. She's been after me since day one. No matter what I did, it was never good enough. And the worst part is, she almost succeeded. Sarah started questioning me, doubting me. George leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I want to help you, Daniel, but I need you to be honest with me. Are you willing to do what it takes to expose her? I looked at him carefully. What do you mean? He turned toward me, eyes firm now. I mean digging deep, finding out what else she's done, getting evidence, and when the time comes, confronting her. Not with accusations, but with truth, facts, something she can't deny. I hesitated. You're her husband. And you're her son-in-law. But that didn't stop her from trying to drug you last night, did it? His words hit hard. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object, a USB voice recorder. I've already started. I recorded our conversation last night after she panicked and told me it was just a vitamin mix she accidentally dropped in the wrong glass. Bullshit. I've known her for 30 years. I can smell a lie from a mile away. My heart pounded. This was real. George wasn't just giving me support, he was handing me a lifeline. A chance to fight back, not with anger, but with strategy. I'll do it, I said, voice steady. He nodded slowly. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. And just like that, the first seed of our plan was planted. Not just to protect myself, but to pull back the curtain on the woman who'd been manipulating all of us from the shadows. Because Margot thought she was untouchable. But she was about to find out she wasn't. George and I parted ways that afternoon, but the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was a pact, unspoken but solid. Something had shifted. For the first time since I married Sarah, I felt like someone in that house actually saw what I'd been going through. I went home and stared at the kitchen table. The scene from last night replayed in my mind over and over. Margot smiling, laughing, handing me that drink. How long had she planned it? And what if I hadn't seen her? I could have ended up in a hospital, or worse. Later that evening, I found Sarah in the bedroom scrolling on her phone. I sat beside her. Can we talk? I asked gently. She looked up, guarded. About what? I took a breath. Your mom. Her jaw tightened instantly. Daniel. No, please, I interrupted. Just let me say this once. She stayed quiet. I know you love her. I know she's your mom, and you don't want to believe anything bad about her. But what she did last night, it wasn't an accident. I saw her put something in my drink. She crossed her arms. You're being paranoid. She said she dropped a vitamin capsule by mistake. I shook my head. Number? She looked around before she did it. She waited until everyone was laughing. She made sure no one saw. Sarah's eyes filled with hesitation, but also resistance. You're twisting things again. She told George the same lie, I said calmly. He didn't buy it either. Sarah blinked. My dad? Yeah, I nodded. He asked to meet me today. Told me he's suspected things for a long time. Said he believes me. He wants to get to the truth. Sarah looked like I'd slapped her. Her shoulders dropped. She wasn't expecting that. Dad said that? I nodded again. He's recording things. He wants to find proof. Real proof. Her silence lasted longer this time. A part of her was breaking. I could feel it. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I knew I had to give her space. The woman I loved was still in there, but Margot had wrapped her up in so many layers of control, she couldn't see straight anymore. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Just don't say anything. Not yet. Just watch. Listen. Keep your eyes open. She gave a slow, unsure nod. That night I lay in bed while Sarah turned away from me. But she wasn't cold. She was thinking. And that was enough for now. The next day, George sent me a text. Lunch at my office. Come alone. He worked at a property management firm downtown. When I got there, he waved me into a private meeting room. He had his laptop open and a USB drive plugged in. I've been backing up her calls, he said. She uses the house landline for everything, old habits. He clicked a file and played a recording. Margot's voice came through, calm and casual. He's too comfortable. Once Daniel's out of the picture, Sarah will be back to herself. I'll make sure of it. My throat tightened. Another clip played. No, it won't take much. Just a few more doubts, a few more stories, maybe a little accident at the next dinner. He's not that sharp. I felt rage bubble up, but I stayed focused. How recent is this? 3 days ago, George said, staring at the screen. She doesn't even care if someone overhears her anymore. That's how deep she thinks her claws are in. He looked at me. You still ready to do this? I nodded. Let's burn her mask off. George smiled faintly. Then it's time we invite her to a little gathering of our own. That evening, I told Sarah we were planning a private dinner. Just family. Just her, me, George, and Margot. I told her I wanted to make peace. She hesitated, but she agreed. She said she'd ask her mom. 2 days later, the 4 of us sat around the same dining table where she'd tried to poison me. But this time, I wasn't scared. This time, I had George. And this time, we were the ones with the plan. The table was set exactly how Margot liked it. Her favorite wine, her choice of appetizers, dim lighting, classical music humming low in the background. She walked in like a queen stepping onto her throne, flashing that same smug smile. "Daniel," she greeted, her tone drenched in sweetness. Hosting dinner now. How charming. Sarah stayed quiet, taking her seat beside me. Her eyes flicked between her parents, unsure. I could feel the tension in her body. Part of her wanted to believe everything was fine. The other part was screaming inside. George poured wine for everyone, except for Margot. "I'll get your drink in a second, dear," he said casually. I wanted to talk first. Margot tilted her head, slightly annoyed. "Talk? About what?" He looked at me and then at Sarah. "About truth." She blinked. "Truth?" George nodded, then turned and pressed a button on the remote next to his plate. A speaker hidden in the corner of the room came to life with a soft click. Then her voice played. "Once Daniel's out of the picture, Sarah will be back to herself." The room froze. Margot's smile dropped instantly. Sarah's eyes widened. What was that? George didn't flinch. He let the next clip roll. Just a few more doubts, a few more stories, maybe a little accident at the next dinner. He's not that sharp. Margot slammed her hand on the table. "What the hell is this? You're spying on me?" "No," George said calmly. "I'm protecting my daughter and my son-in-law, something you clearly stopped doing a long time ago." Her face twisted with rage. "This is manipulation. You're twisting my words." "No one twisted anything," I said. "You said it. You meant it. You nearly poisoned me." Sarah was pale, shaking. "Mom, is this real?" Margot turned to her, desperate. "Sweetheart, of course not. They're framing me. Your father and Daniel. They've always wanted to get rid of me. Can't you see it?" George reached into his folder and slid a printed transcript of the recordings across the table. "I started recording after I saw you crush something into Daniel's glass. I checked the trash, found the residue, took it to the lab. It was a sedative, a strong one." Sarah covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Margot tried to grab the paper, but Sarah pulled it closer, scanning the lines. The further down she read, the more her hands trembled. I didn't speak. I let the truth sit in the room like thick smoke, choking out every lie Margot had built over the years. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. She looked up, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw her, the real her. "I defended you," she whispered to her mother. "I called Daniel paranoid. I told him he was imagining things. I was protecting you," Margot shouted. "He was making you weak. You were becoming soft, distracted, just like I was when I married your father. I was saving you." George stood up. "Don't you dare use that excuse again. You didn't do this out of love. You did it out of control." Margot's face turned red with fury. "You're all against me, all of you. You'll regret this." She grabbed her purse and stormed out. No one followed her. The door slammed behind her like a final nail in the coffin. Silence. Sarah sat motionless. I placed a hand gently on hers, not to claim victory, but to offer her something stable, something real. "I'm sorry," she said, tears falling. "I should have believed you sooner." I squeezed her hand. "You believe me now. That's all that matters." George cleared his throat. "I'll have her served a restraining order tomorrow. She's out of our lives." For the first time in years, I exhaled, truly exhaled. The weight lifted from my chest like I'd been underwater for too long and finally broke the surface. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. Margot had spent years turning Sarah against me, whispering poison, manipulating her thoughts. A few recordings wouldn't undo all the damage. Trust had to be rebuilt, slowly, carefully. But now at least we had the truth. And I had my wife's eyes back. The silence after Margot left wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the quiet after a storm that left everything scattered and wet. Sarah hadn't moved in minutes. Her eyes were locked on the transcript in front of her, as if rereading the same lines might make them go away. I didn't push. I just sat there, letting her breathe in it, letting the truth settle. George gently stood and walked to the kitchen. "I'll leave you two alone," he said. "Let me know if you need anything." When the door clicked shut behind him, Sarah finally spoke. "She's not the woman I thought she was." Her voice was small like a child's. I leaned in. "I know." "I let her control everything," she said, more to herself than to me. "Our dinners, our conversations, our marriage." I thought she meant well. "You're not the only one she fooled." She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "How did you stand it for so long?" I smiled faintly, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Because I loved you. And I thought one day, maybe you'd see what she was doing." She swallowed hard and reached across the table, taking my hand. "I'm so sorry, Daniel, for everything, for not seeing it, for doubting you, for defending her when she..." Her voice broke. "When she tried to hurt you." I wrapped my fingers around hers. "We can't undo what happened, but we can start from here." She nodded slowly, but I could see the guilt creeping in like shadows behind her eyes. She was going to carry this for a long time, and I knew I had to help her through it, not just for her sake, but for mine, for us. The next few days were delicate. Sarah barely spoke. She avoided the living room where Margot's voice had echoed off the walls. She didn't answer her phone, didn't return messages, and I didn't pressure her. I just made coffee, brought her meals, sat quietly near her, and let her come back on her own terms. One night, about a week later, she walked into the living room holding a photo album. One of those thick, leather-bound ones Margot had made for us after our wedding. She sat next to me on the couch and opened it slowly. "I want to look through this," she said. "With you." I nodded, and we flipped through it together, page by page, year by year. Pictures of our honeymoon in Greece, her smiling with a flower crown, me laughing with a wine glass in hand. Birthday parties, weekend getaways, candid shots from lazy Sundays. Then we hit the pictures where Margot's presence was always there, behind us, beside us, always watching. "She was always in the frame," Sarah murmured. "Even when we didn't invite her in," I added gently. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I feel like I've been in a fog for years." I kissed her hair. "You're waking up now." For the first time in what felt like forever, she looked at me with clear eyes. Real eyes, the ones I fell in love with. We started going on walks again. Nothing far, just around the neighborhood, but it felt like a reset. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. Other times, she'd reach for my hand in the middle of a sentence and smile like it surprised her. The distance that had built like a wall between us was slowly cracking, but healing wasn't linear. One afternoon, I came home to find Sarah crying on the kitchen floor. Margot had sent her a letter, long, venomous, and full of gaslighting. Sarah clutched the pages like they burned her hands. She said she was only trying to save me, she cried. She still thinks she did nothing wrong. I knelt beside her. That's who she is, Sarah, and it's not your job to fix her. I know, she sobbed, but she's my mother. I pulled her into me and held her there. And I'm your husband, and I'll keep reminding you every day that you are free from her now. She nodded against my chest. Promise me something. Anything. If I ever start becoming like her, pull me back. I cupped her face and looked into her eyes. I'll never let you forget who you really are. That night, we slept close. No space between us. No walls. Just skin, breath, and the quiet rhythm of rebuilding something that had nearly been destroyed. We weren't healed. Not yet. But for the first time in years, we were healing. And this time, together. A few weeks passed and I could feel the shift in Sarah. It wasn't sudden, more like the seasons changing. She started smiling again, but it wasn't the polite kind she gave to guests or the forced one she used to hide tension. It was soft, real. There were moments she'd reach out and fix the collar of my shirt or ask me to join her for coffee, little gestures that felt like old memories returning. But the real turning point came one Saturday morning when she said, I want to confront her, face to face. I looked up from the garden I was tending. Are you sure? She nodded, her jaw tight. I need to say it to her face, for myself, for us. I let her control me for too long. I stood up, brushing the soil from my hands. I'll be there with you. No, she said firmly. I have to do this alone. But I need you nearby, just in case. The plan was simple. Sarah invited her mother to a neutral spot, a cafe downtown. Not our home, not hers. Somewhere public, controlled. I parked a block away, my phone on loud, my body tense. She walked in first, head high, stronger than I'd seen her in years. I waited in the car, staring at the door. Minutes dragged. Then an hour passed, and finally, I saw Sarah walk out. Her steps were slower, her hands trembling a bit. I rushed to meet her halfway. Are you okay? I asked, grabbing her hand. She nodded slowly. I told her everything. That I knew what she did. That I had the lab reports, the transcript, the footage. I told her she needed to stay away from us permanently. I wrapped my arms around her. How did she take it? She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there and smiled like she still had control, like she didn't believe me. But when I stood up and left, she didn't follow. That was the first time she didn't try to stop me. We drove home in silence, but it was a peaceful kind this time, like something heavy had been lifted off her shoulders. That night we burned the old photo album Margot had made, not out of anger, but to release it, to let go of the poison laced through those years. We saved the photos of us, the real ones, the ones she hadn't staged. But everything else? Gone. The flame crackled as the thick pages curled and blackened. Sarah watched quietly, her hands in mine. It's over, she whispered. Yes, I said. Now we write our own story. In the weeks that followed, Sarah began therapy, alone and then with me. We talked about the years of manipulation, the layers we didn't even realize were there. The missed birthdays, the guilt tripping, the way Margot twisted every moment to make herself the center of everything. And as Sarah healed, so did I. I started working on a memoir, something private at first, just for me. Writing helped. It was like putting the chaos into order. Naming things gave them less power. One night, I let Sarah read a few pages. She cried. Then she kissed me like it was the first time we'd ever kissed. Slow, grateful, filled with apology and promise. But Margot wasn't completely done. A month later, we got a letter. Not a direct threat, but a subtle reminder. Family is forever, she'd written, signed in her perfectly sharp handwriting. I looked at Sarah. What do you want to do? She took the letter, tore it down the center, and tossed it in the fireplace. "We decide who our family is," she said calmly. We blocked her number, changed the locks, informed our friends, and we made a pact: no more secrets, no more letting things fester in silence. One Sunday morning, as we sipped tea on the porch, Sarah said, "I still feel guilty sometimes." "That's okay," I told her. "Healing doesn't mean you forget. It just means you remember without letting it break you." She smiled. "Thank you, Daniel." "For what?" "For staying. For not giving up on me." I kissed her knuckles. "I never stopped seeing you, even when you couldn't see yourself." And as the sun rose behind us, for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't known I was missing. Peace. Not just the absence of chaos, but the quiet joy of being seen, heard, and finally loved without conditions. Peace didn't mean life became perfect. It just meant we had space to breathe again. And after everything we'd been through, that space felt like freedom. But I wasn't done yet. Not with Margot. Not completely. I never wanted revenge in the way people picture it. Rage, destruction, public shame. That's not who I was. But I did want accountability. She had walked away from all of it like it was just another family squabble. Like she hadn't drugged me, almost destroyed my marriage, and played God with people's lives. I needed her to know that her actions had consequences. So I did what I do best. I planned. Margot had a reputation in her social circles. Everyone knew her as the picture-perfect matriarch, the woman who hosted charity galas, led community fundraisers, mentored young wives. But behind closed doors, she manipulated everyone around her like pawns on a board. I began compiling everything, every recording, every message, every voice memo Sarah had saved from years of controlling phone calls, every financial document she had forced Sarah to sign. And of course, the lab report and transcript from the night she tried to drug me. It was meticulous, precise, quiet. I wasn't going to make a public scandal. I was going to let her watch herself fall. One of the women she mentored, Elise, had once confided in Sarah how Margot tried to interfere in her marriage too, posing as support but sowing doubt in every sentence. I contacted her. We met at a bookstore, quiet, neutral. When I showed her the documents, her hands shook. "I knew she was manipulative," she whispered, "but I didn't know it was this dark." Together, we built a file, a full dossier of Margot's pattern: emotional abuse, coercive control, gaslighting tactics, and finally, criminal behavior. I gave it all to Elise and told her, "Do what you think is right." A week later, the fallout began. Margot was dropped from the charity board. Her name was quietly removed from upcoming events. 3 of her close friends cut ties without explanation. She didn't know I was behind it. That's what made it powerful. The woman who always needed control, suddenly losing it, and not knowing where it was going or who had taken it. Sarah and I watched it all unfold from a distance. No gloating, no celebration, just closure. A few days later, Sarah came into my study holding a manila envelope. This came in the mail. It was from Margot. Inside was a single photo. Me and Sarah on our wedding day. On the back, written in that sharp, elegant handwriting, "I hope you're happy now. I always knew you were too smart for me." There was no apology, no remorse, just ego, wounded, cornered ego. Sarah looked at me. "What do we do with it?" I tore the photo in half and tossed it in the shredder. "We keep moving forward." And we did. But something in me had changed. Not in a bitter way, in a grounded way. I had learned how far someone would go to protect their illusion of control, how important it is to trust your instincts, and how powerful love becomes when you strip away fear. We renovated our home, nothing major, just new paint, new energy. We began hosting dinners again. Friends came over, laughed, asked questions. Some knew, some didn't. We told the truth only to those who had earned it. One evening, as we sat with wine under the garden lights, Sarah said, "You know, If she had just accepted us, none of this would have happened. I nodded. But then, we would have never known what we were capable of. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. You didn't just save our marriage, Daniel. You saved me. And for the first time in years, I finally felt like I was standing on solid ground. Not behind anyone's shadow. Not doubting myself. Just Daniel, husband, survivor, and no longer a victim of her games. I thought that would be the end of it. Margot had fallen from her self-built throne. Sarah and I were rebuilding. Life was beginning to feel soft again, ordinary. I didn't expect anything else from the past to show up again, but it did, just not in the way I imagined. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where the sunlight touches everything gently, like it's apologizing for the storms before it. Sarah and I were sipping coffee on the porch, our dog napping lazily near the steps. That's when I saw the envelope, not in the mail, on the porch, tucked under a small potted plant we'd just bought. My name was written on the front in handwriting I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. It was from my father-in-law, Harold, the man who had once taken my side during all the madness, who drank the spiked drink that night and ended up in the hospital, who had slowly distanced himself from everyone, especially Margot, after the truth began leaking out. Inside was a letter. No greetings, just a quiet, direct truth. Daniel, I've watched from the sidelines for too long. I should have spoken up years ago. Margot has always needed control, and I was too weak to fight her. But you didn't just survive her. You exposed her with grace. You didn't destroy her, even when you could have. That makes you a better man than I ever was. I'm proud Sarah chose you. I'm sorry for not doing more. If you ever need a friend or just a quiet conversation, you know where I am. I left her. Finally. Took me long enough. I read that letter twice. Then again. I wasn't sure what I felt. Not anger, not joy either. Just a deep, echoing understanding of what pain does to people when they let it live inside them too long. I showed Sarah the letter. She sat in silence, reading it slowly. Her lips trembled when she finished. I used to hate him for never standing up to her, she said softly. But maybe people break differently. We visited Harold a week later. His place was small, clean, and filled with quiet. He looked older, but lighter, as if the weight he'd carried for decades had finally slid off his back. We didn't talk much about Margot. Just life, regret, peace. He asked me about the garden Sarah and I had planted. Asked if we still had the piano she used to play. It felt strange. Not like reconciliation, but repair. The kind of healing that doesn't come with apologies or big speeches. Just presence. Just showing up and being honest for once. As we left, he hugged me. For the first time in years. Tight. Real. Thank you, he whispered. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. On the drive home, Sarah held my hand the whole way. Her eyes were distant, but calm. I think I needed that, she said. Me too. By now, the story had already faded from the outside world. People moved on. The gossip vanished. Margot remained isolated, still trying to control whatever fragments she had left. But the world had seen through her. She couldn't manipulate like before. She was powerless. But strangely, I didn't hate her anymore. I pitied her, because in the end, all her scheming had done was expose the truth about herself and drive away the very people she claimed to protect, her husband, her daughter, even her reputation. I realized something important that day. Revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like distance, like silence, like building a life so full of love and truth that their lies can't breathe near you. I had done that, not with rage, but with patience, with purpose, with Sarah. And it was enough. It was more than enough. 6 months later, I stood in the middle of our backyard, watching the garden bloom. It wasn't fancy, just a few rows of flowers, some herbs, a small tree Sarah had planted when we moved in. But to me, it was more than a garden. It was proof. Proof that life grows again, even after someone tries to poison the soil. Sarah came outside carrying 2 mugs of tea. She looked peaceful, tired maybe, but in that quiet, fulfilled way. Like she finally felt safe. Like her heart wasn't holding its breath anymore. We sat down on the bench together. "I talked to Mom yesterday," she said suddenly. I didn't say anything. "She's still trying to act like she's the victim. Said you manipulated her, turned people against her. She asked if I'd forgive her." I looked at her gently. "And?" "I told her forgiveness isn't something you ask for just to make yourself feel better. You earn it. And she hasn't even begun." That was the first time I saw Sarah not cry when she talked about her mom. There was no anger either, just clarity. "She said she missed me," Sarah added quietly. I nodded. "Maybe she does, but that doesn't mean you owe her your peace." Sarah looked at me. "You know what I realized, Daniel?" "What?" All those years, she tried to control everything. Maybe she was just afraid of being abandoned, of losing relevance, of being left behind. Still doesn't excuse what she did. No, it doesn't. But I don't think she'll ever get better if she keeps pretending she did nothing wrong. I didn't know what to say, so I just squeezed her hand. Sometimes love means holding space, not giving answers. A few days later, I got a letter, this time from Margot. It was short and empty. No real apology, just vague lines like, "I hope you're doing well and maybe we can start over one day." She never once admitted what she'd done. Never mentioned the drink or the manipulation or the way she turned my wife against me in the worst year of my life. I read it once, then folded it up and placed it in a drawer I never opened again, because I didn't need her closure. I already had mine. We moved a year later, found a quieter place in the countryside. More room, more quiet, more stars. I started writing, just small articles, nothing big. But every time I typed a word, I felt a little more like myself. Like the man I was before everything went dark. Sarah painted again. Her art, once filled with tension and grief, started to look like joy. And one evening, as we watched the sun melt into the hills, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I looked at her, stunned. "Sarah, I never blamed you. But I blamed myself," she said. "For letting her twist me, for doubting you, for almost throwing it all away." I wrapped my arms around her. "You came back. That's all that matters." There was a silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was whole. Later that year, we got a call from Harold. He'd joined a support group for spouses who had lived under manipulative partners. He was helping others find their voices, quietly, gently, the way only someone who's lived through it can. "I owe it to the next guy," he told me. "I stayed quiet too long." I was proud of him. I was proud of us. Not because we got revenge, but because we didn't let it destroy who we were. We outgrew the pain, outlasted the lies, outlived the war. And now, when I think of that night, the spiked drink, the betrayal, the rage, I don't feel fire anymore. I feel peace. Because in the end, I didn't need to hurt her. She did that to herself. I just needed to survive. And I did.